What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. As 2 weeks of 2025 passed, Russian forces have taken Kursk, while the Ukrainian army mounted a new offensive near Kursk. On the surface, these clashes might look like a regular sequence of gains, losses and new lines on a map. Commentators throw around the name of obscure and mostly abandoned villages as though they held monumental importance, and we get daily updates and who's making progress. Meanwhile, each side experiments with modified weaponry, the Ukrainians with their unconventional electronic warfare gadgets, the Russians with their so-called optical fiber drones, one ironically nicknamed Prince Vandal of Novgorod, or KVN, same as the Russian comedy show, where, by the way, Zelensky was participating in the past. Yet, despite all the hype, if you can call it this way, the truth is plain and brutal. Both sides maneuver inch by inch across a vast region, wasting entire days, weeks and months over territory smaller than any moderately sized metropolis. Specifically, it has been mentioned that during the entire 2024, total area that was advanced or liberated equals only to the size of 2 Moscows. That's absolutely nothing, taking into consideration that hundreds of thousands of men from both sides either lost their lives or got injured. Seems like a cause for concern, right? And well, apparently, the newly appointed governor of Kursk region, Alexander Khinshtein, thinks exactly that, as he acknowledged, indirectly, the horrible costs of Russia capturing the eastern Ukraine. And that in fact the war is hurting Russia a lot. Way more than Putin's inner circle and propaganda claims. The current situation in Kursk reveals a bleak truth. The people living there are paying a price they never agreed to. Homes lie in ruins, forced evacuees wonder if they will ever go back, and local officials shrug, as if to say, you should be grateful you are alive, and not everything is destroyed. Acting Governor Alexander Khinshtein is the face of this dismissive stance. He is a member of Putin's inner circle. He likes dramas and gossip, has a lot of dirt on many government officials, so people claim that his assignment as a governor of such troublesome region is some kind of a punishment for his doings. Nobody knows exactly what he has done, but we can only guess, if you know what I mean. And since he is not that much of a government type of person, this role is a brand new challenge for him. You can already see how desperate residents of Kursk should be. There was no support at all when the incursion happened back in August, and now they have a new governor who not only does not care about people's suffering, but openly confronts them and blames them for complaining. He claims the government is already straining its pockets to rebuild, so basically citizens who lost everything should stop whining. One particularly outrageous case is his direct quote that if you have something insufficient destroyed, something like sauna, don't even bother filing a complaint with us, you are not getting anything. When an elderly activist named Valery Moiseyev dared to point out that the aid was too little, that only a few fortunate individuals managed to get certificates for new housing, the ones that obviously got paraded on TV for propaganda purposes, and that they also lacked cash even for the most basic furniture, Khinshtein lashed out on this person in return. He almost literally said, how dare you ask something from the government? You think the government has not done enough for you? What about the roads, public transport, hospitals and schools? You are very ungrateful and egoistic, asking for more. This attitude echoes an infamous statement from Olga Gladskih a few years back, when she mentioned that the government did not ask anyone to have children. It is the same brand of cynism. Officials speaking as if there is a separate realm called the government, which owes nothing to people. The troubling part here is that Khinshtein's cynism is not unique. It speaks for an entire system that believes citizens are liability, not a priority. Kursk might just be the front where these views appear on the surface most visibly. But make no mistake, this mentality seeps into every city, settlement, region and every interaction. And in the middle of the war, it only intensifies. The simple truth is that whether you live in a war zone or 1,000 miles away, the regime treats you like you are nothing but an annoying insect who always demands more and more. But actually, if you think about it, this palpable desperation is not without a reason. Indirectly, Khinshtein reveals the true hardships of war. It significantly affects Russia, its economy, people and attitude overall. They try to silence war-related activities because people are simply tired. But many government representatives, specifically the governor of Kursk in our case, who are yet unexperienced to bite their tongue in order not to accidentally reveal some unpleasant information, they actually do a disservice to the regime of Putin. People see that the budget is nearly empty. There are no money for anything except soldiers' salaries and military factories. The frustration is within the highest echelons of power. Some are able to hide it, while the others reveal everything like an open book. You don't even need to be an expert psychologist to read the face and body language of such people. But since Putin wants to keep pushing no matter what, it just keeps destroying Russia even further. He thinks propaganda can take care of calming the people, but even propaganda itself can no longer juggle between multiple different narratives, changing literally every single day. The war became a huge mess for Putin, and through his closest allies such as Khinshtein, we can see the reality from behind the Kremlin's walls. If we shift our attention to the east, the devastation in Ukrainian towns and cities is impossible to ignore. Places like Vovchansk, Avdiivka, Marinka, Vuhledar and Bakhmut are echoes of their former selves, with barely a fraction of their old populations remaining. Bakhmut, once bustling with 70,000 people, now stands nearly empty. Vuhledar, according to the most recent information, houses only 116 residents. The cost to Ukraine is staggering: destroyed homes, refugees scattered across borders, countless families with loved ones killed or wounded. But Russia is also bleeding. And I mean Russia, not the regime of Putin. The official narrative brags about adding new liberated territories or launching more advanced drone strikes, such as the optical fiber ones we talked about in the beginning of the video. So long story short, the idea behind them is that has its connection, it's actually wired, not wireless. And because of this, the usual anti-drone guns and interception systems are no longer effective. But at the same time, the Russian propaganda conveniently ignores that the manpower fueling these advances is not endless. That earlier wave of young men forced into the army through this special military operation in 2022 and 2023 has by now left thousands of new widows and orphans in Russia. Anyone returning from the front wounded or disabled becomes a long-term burden on a state that barely acknowledges even their existence. Russia's workforce is shrinking, its birth rate continues to plunge, and the future cost of caring for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of disabled is incalculable. In a country that once raised the retirement age, we will now be seeing men in their 20s or 30s effectively being transferred to a pension for life. With these cold statistics piling up, the sound of victory rings hollow, whether you're counting gains near Kurakhove or witnessing fires in Russian cities and oil refineries. Putin's army fights in another country, but it is like hitting you with your bare fists against the wall with sharp edges. A few small stones might chip away here and there, but it is your fist's flesh and bones which will be damaged the most. You would think there might be some massive strategic advantage for Russia if it seizes bits of eastern Ukraine, but the political landscape reveals otherwise. The real irony here is that the areas being blown to pieces like Donetsk, Luhansk and Kharkiv had historically been quite friendly towards Moscow. Even after the Euromaidan and the rise of more nationalist government in Kiev, more nationalist according to Russia, much of eastern Ukraine retained a distinctly pro-Russian sentiment. They spoke Russian, voted for Russian-oriented politicians, and maintained strong cultural ties across the border. This was a demographic that might have continued favoring close relations with Russia for decades. Instead, the war's brutality, the countless missiles raining down, and the flattening of cities have obliterated that attitude completely. Now entire communities that once looked to Moscow with some level of trust have been driven out. Residents of eastern Ukraine force themselves to speak Ukrainian, even if they are more proficient in Russian. That's actually true. For many people in the east of the country, Russian was the first language before 2022. Even the warlord Igor Girkin noticed in 2014 that local support for any breakaway cause was not exactly overwhelming. But this reality is no longer the case. Bombed out towns do not remain sympathetic towards the entity that dropped the bombs in the first place, no matter how much pro-Moscow propaganda was broadcasted in the previous life. For Russia, this is a self-inflicted diplomatic and cultural catastrophe, overshadowed only by the immediate humanitarian crisis. Whenever peace does come, hopefully sooner rather than later, trying to rebuild any relationship with the Ukrainian East will be indefinitely harder than it was before this war started, if possible at all. In that sense, the war was lost the moment it started, no matter how many square miles on the map changed hands. Putin wanted to bring closer hesitating Ukrainians, those who felt like they are kinda Russians living in Ukraine, who had friends and relatives just across the border, less than an hour away driving. What happened in the end is that those people became the most dedicated opponents of Russia. Friendships were broken, family ties severed. Not all of them, but for many. Putin did way more harm than good for both countries. So, who really wins when a city in ruins like Vuhledar changes hands? Wikipedia article might say something like, the Battle of Vuhledar lasted from August 24, 2022 to October 1, 2024 and ended in a Russian victory. But that conclusion overlooks who has left paying the bills. Homes are now destroyed, men are either dead or living with permanent injuries, and entire families are fleeing from one ruin to another. Each so-called triumph deepens the trenches between Russia and Ukraine, drains Russia's population and finances, and ensures that future ties, economic, cultural, and even human, are brought to the breaking point. What remains for the Russians is a generation of shattered veterans stuck on a minimal state handouts, an economy destroyed from war spending, and a diplomatic path that riddled with sanctions. And for those living in actual war zones, every new push, every reported breakthrough means more craters in their backyards. All we hear is Russians advance here, Ukrainians push there, but for locals living on these territories, these are not just two sentences mentioned in a heartbeat in a YouTube video. These are daily reminders that you can't be accidentally killed. They hear the shots, the missiles and the drones, and I don't think they will ever get used to these noises. Even the situation in Kursk exemplifies how badly this war has changed Russia from within. A foreign army crossing the internationally recognized border is a violation, but the real betrayal is coming from officials who openly declare they owe nothing to the citizens and that it is up to them to survive if they want to live. Housing, financial support, food and medicine will only be provided in exchange for good videos to show during evening news. Well, Freud mistake, right? This gap between the regime and the population has turned into an abyss, exposing an ugly rift that will linger long after the guns fall silent. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow. We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell, their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they